And we are live. Hey guys, this is Ruben Dua from Dubb's podcast Connection Loop. And I am on with Amy Blaschka. We're going to get into this idea of storytelling to build a personal brand and so much more, in fact. So, Amy, if you could just give me a quick bio on yourself and let's get into this.
Sure. Well, I am a social media ghostwriter and career storyteller, and I help leaders communicate and connect better by crafting their stories. And I spent like, it makes me sound really old, but like 3 decades branding people and places and things. And so now, instead of helping with Coca-Cola or General Mills, I'm using all that skill set to help people with their personal brands and thought leadership to communicate and connect better.
Sometimes I think about this word branding, and when I take away all the new meanings of the word branding, it takes me back to Texas, where there's a bunch of cattle, and there's an iron that's hot, that's getting, and animals are getting branded. Where does this term even come from? What are the origins? How did it come to mean what it means today?
I mean, I think the idea, and with the physical brand, is to quickly identify, a belonging and sort of, well, your cattle, your possessions, that sort of thing. But you come to associate. It's like, oh, okay, if that cow is part of this brand, then there are a bunch of attributes that people associate with that company, with that brand, and because really a brand isn't a logo. A brand isn't just a color palette. It's really more about those, intangibles. It's how people feel about you. It's very rooted in emotion. So when I was a branding consultant with Landor Associates, we just say a brand is a promise. So when somebody identifies with the brand, it's because that there's that linkage. It's sort of like they anticipate and they expect a certain experience. And to feel a certain way when you align yourself with certain brands, even if you don't realize you're doing this with something like an iPhone, an Apple, there's certain things that go along with that brand that you sort of stand behind and you align with. So the same is true when you are thinking about personal brands. And really, it's about clearly articulating and making it easy for others to understand what matters most to you, what you're about, the value you bring, who you are, who you help. So a brand is a shortcut. When people understand what your brand is about, they understand better you. And if it's something that resonates with them, and it's important to note, not every brand is for everybody, right? There are, there's somebody that's right for you and there's someone who's probably wrong for you, and that's okay. But you need to make sure that you have clearly articulated that, because you can't be all things to all people. Anyone who tries to do that, any brand who tries to do that, regardless of a human or it's soda or whatever, you'll fail, because you'll just be a watered down version of yourself or your product or your service.
So that's a really good point of trying to cater to everyone. So what are some of the failures that you might see in that regard?
Well, it's tempting. I will say too, I have a lot of my clients are founders, entrepreneurs, sort of people who, have worked for many decades in the business world and have gone out on their own, or they're just like, okay, I'm going to do this. And I think the mistake a lot of folks make when they first do that is thinking that they need to be all things to everyone, particularly if they're a solopreneur, particularly if they are in the service industry. So for instance, I'm a social media ghostwriter. Am I able to write other types of things? Yes. But if and I do this, and I do this, and I do this, and I do this, if suddenly I'm doing 12 different things, it's my value and sort of the experience at doing any one of those sort of goes down by nature of doing those many things. However, if you focus and you niche down to do one, maybe two things, then you can become more expert, because that's what you're doing all the time. And I think there's a fear that if I niche down too much, I'll lose out on potential opportunities. But what happens is when you focus and you have clarity around what you do and what you don't do, you make it absolutely easier for those people who are looking for what you actually do to find you. And it makes it easier for those who aren't really your set of clients or the people that you're trying to identify, it lets them drop away. And no, there's still instances where people will come to me and they'll say, oh, but or I've worked with them maybe on something else. Oh, can you do this? And if it's something that is really closely aligned with what I do and it makes sense, I'll say yes. But if it's not, I will just refer that to somebody else and I'll help explain the difference so they know. And so, if somebody asks me to say, can you write a press release, Amy? I'll say, oh, well, can I? Yes, but I'm not going to do that because that's not the highest and best use of my talents. And instead, I'm going to refer you to a PR professional that I know who that's what she does or that's what he does because that's the highest and best use of their talent. So if you are trying to be all things to all people, you'd be nothing to anyone, right? You want to identify what you're best at and then lead with that so others that are looking for that can easily find you so you can work together.
Got it. That makes sense to me. One of the other realities is the idea that this is a long game. Okay. Mm-hmm. This doesn't happen overnight. Branding doesn't happen overnight. Social doesn't happen overnight. It takes a while, Yeah. Do ads happen overnight? I would argue no. I mean, if you think that you can get your ads to convert overnight, then it's a massive missed opportunity because there is retargeting, there is branding, there is word of mouth, there is referrals and testimonials and all those things that need to happen, which are all brand that will ultimately increase your ads. But speak to me about this idea of investing in the long game.
Yeah. So that's a big one for me. So there are three things I talk about, I feel like all the time, but they play to this idea of the long game, right? There's no immediate sense. Nothing's going to happen overnight. And with branding, like most things, it's going to take multiple points of impact, multiple touch points, you interacting, whether it's your content, whether you're speaking with somebody, whether you're having a phone conversation, that sort of thing, to kind of keep you top of mind. And then branding is about, mindshare, essentially. You want to occupy, the minds of the people that you're trying to reach. And you want to do it in a good way. You want them to come to associate you with those things that you're, I'm an expert in this. So I want them for instance, I don't want people to think about Amy Blaschka and then think cryptocurrency, because that's not my wheelhouse, right? I don't want that to be the case. So the way that you can help do that is through three things. Clarity, which I already talked about, being clear on what you do, consistency, and discipline. So you need to regularly put out your wisdom. If you want people to come to associate you as a thought leader with a particular topic or industry, then you need to let them know what you think about that. And you need to do it on a regular basis. It's not enough to put out one video or, one piece of content on something and go, oh, one and done, I'm all done. That's not how it's going to work. First of all, as we all know, social media, it feeds, your attention span is like this big and feeds change constantly. So you need to make sure that you are putting out on a regular basis sort of what you believe, what matters most to you, and speak in such a way that will attract your intended audience. So it piques their interest, because guess what? If you put out 7 pieces of content, they may only see 1, maybe they see 2, but once they get to see it and they see it regularly and they come to expect that from you, they're either going to connect with you or follow you. And they're going to be anticipating, okay, I really like what this guy has to say. I want to know more. And the idea behind social media in particular is it is a long game. It does take time. It does, in branding in particular, they go hand in hand, right? So if you are regularly showing up and you're putting out your, sharing your wisdom, and you are engaging, because that's the other part of social, it's not just a one-way street. The best sort of end result of social media is that you are initiating a conversation. You are inviting others in. Because from there, and this does happen, when people see what you're putting out there, they'll be curious. You pique your interest. They'll come back and maybe they'll click on your profile if you're on LinkedIn, or they want to know more about you, or they'll reach out to you. And that's when that begins. You begin a relationship. And relationships, I hope for most people, are long-term, right? That you are going to get out of it what you put into it. And, whether it is, your social media or your business, any client, right? It's relationship over transaction. So you think about it that way, and you think about it, this goes over the long term. I've had many clients come to me that I didn't even know were following what I put out there, to say, yeah, I've been following you for months, Amy. And then suddenly they reach out. And this has happened to my clients as well. They're like, oh my gosh. I even had a client, and even though I don't say that what I'm doing it's not, copy driven to conversion, meaning it's not copywriting where I'm selling or writing for somebody in a sales capacity. But I will tell you, I have a client who's like, oh my gosh, Amy, I know because we've been working together regularly and I've been putting content out on LinkedIn about, and not salesy, but very much about her leadership perspective as an entrepreneur running a company. She said, I can pinpoint the uptick in my business. And I've had people actually say, I really like what you wrote and that made me reach out. And now I want to work with you. So it does take time, but it does work. And it's a long-term strategy, not an overnight success. So if you have tried or you think you've tried, but it hasn't worked out, you have to stick with it. Because once you're in that, it's like a sales pipeline, right? It's not going to just like, oh, one and done. You have to be constantly sort of feeding it and nurturing those relationships, and it will happen over time.
And I can say firsthand that the long game is so much better of an ROI than how are we going to get some short sales copy that's going to convert overnight? Because the problem with that is that there's a lot of risks. You burn a certain audience, right?
Yeah.
The people that are saying, I don't want to be sold to and I'm not here to buy, but I'm here to learn and I'm here to discover and make connections with people. That it's just a much bigger audience. So love that philosophy.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, it's what I tell my clients too, is it's about serving, not selling. So
it's about serving and not selling.
Yeah, because everything that you put out there should be of value to your intended audience, right? It should offer your insight. It should offer a lesson learned, even if, and this is important, even if you messed up, right? Because there's this sort of notion on social media, and maybe not so much on LinkedIn, but sometimes, where it's all about the humble brag, or, oh, I'm so I did this. Oh gosh, what about? And the reality is nobody is perfect, right? None of us is. So, if you share a time as a leader, you're a little vulnerable and share something where, oh man, that didn't go the way I thought. But then you talk about what you did and how you had the resilience and how you bounced back, or what happened as a result of that and what changed. That lets people not only into your own world and understand that you're human, because people connect with people work with people, not just brands up here as in capital letters. You'll draw them to you naturally, and they'll feel like, oh, okay, and then they feel like, okay, that's me too. That's me too. I get that. And it helps them connect better with you and understand that maybe it happens more. It's not just them, that maybe they failed or something didn't go the way they planned, and if you're a leader, you're still out there and you're still trying. It kind of gives them the encouragement to keep going too. So I think it's important to share the wins, certainly, and what worked, but it's also okay to share when things didn't go as planned.
Well, yeah, I think it's much more interesting to learn from that, because there's nothing better than learning from other people's mistakes.
Yeah. Right.
So, this idea of figuring out an equation for something, or, figuring out the LinkedIn algorithm and then creating a content calendar based on that. I'm not a big fan of that. It sounds like you're not either. And I think the reason is because, first of all, none of this can be gamed per se. This has to be extremely authentic, number one. And number two is that if there was a game or an equation, by the time you figure it out, the algo has changed. So you're always going to be behind the curve. Right. So with those assumptions in place, what is the, not equation, but what is the recipe that you might suggest to us in terms of when I should use video, when I should use copy, when I should use image? How should we create that diverse mix?
I think there's this thing. If you're someone who's never tried video, you've never tried doing something, try it. I mean, what is the worst that could happen? Honestly, it's like you want to do it out there. And I think particularly with video, there are a lot of folks that are scared because they're like, oh my God, I'm not a speaker. What can I do? And again, if you come back to being a real human being, and speak from the heart, please, if you're doing it, you don't need it to be so professional. And there are so many ways to do it now. Obviously Dubb, and there's other means that you can use to make the process easier. I would say when you're trying these things, try them. First of all, make sure you try and do it and see kind of what happens. But I would say too, keep it short and sweet. I think the biggest thing that I see, the mishaps with any content, whether it is video or it's writing, people just go on and on and on, or they give this preamble before they really get to the point. And,
Yes.
with social media, you have this much time to kind of have that scroll stopper, or for someone to, if they click on that video and you're doing, well, yeah, today and I don't know, just get to it, right?
Yes.
Or if you're doing a post, same thing, jump right in. You got to have something that's going to hook them in. So if you want to sort of have a stream of consciousness, that's fine, but edit it until you right when the action starts. You gotta hook them in. It's like if you watch a movie or read a book, you don't want a whole lot of, okay, we'll get to it. We get to the good stuff. You want someone to understand. So lead with that strength. Lead with, what are you talking about? And keep it short. Keep it short, keep it sweet, keep it brief. Don't ramble on. Get to the point. And it's surprisingly hard for people to do that.
It is very difficult.
And I would say too is one way to make that easier is to stick to one topic and one takeaway. If you have one main idea, it's a lot easier to keep it brief and concise. If you find yourself talking about 3 or 4 different things, probably you need to chop that up into 3 or 4 different updates or videos or something. It's much easier to have one sort of thing that you can talk about. And, I'd say the other thing is to keep whatever you're doing, whatever format you're doing, make sure that what you're talking about is in your wheelhouse. Like I said, I've used that cryptocurrency as something that's outside of my wheelhouse. Now, do you have the flexibility? Yes, you can talk about whatever you want, but remember, the people that are watching this are going to come to associate you with whatever you put out, and what you put out is within your control, right? You are choosing to do that. So be very intentional and thoughtful and aware of the topics that you're speaking about and your point of view and what you're putting out into the world, because people will take notice. They're like, oh, okay, that's what she's about. And then repeat. You need to stay in that 2, maybe 3 things, and that's what you're about. And then the other piece of that is when you are mixing it up and you are putting content out there, make sure that when people, hopefully they're curious about you and they click back to your profile, that what you have there aligns and is not incongruent with the content that you're putting out into the world. If you haven't updated your LinkedIn profile since 1994, it's probably a good idea to take another look. And, it's an area of real estate, particularly your profile, the summary and about section, that so many people either leave blank or they just cut and paste sort of some old bio into in a third person. This is an opportunity for you to talk directly to an audience member, somebody that, took the time to click on your profile. They obviously have some sort of interest in you or your service or what you're about. So this is the chance for you to make it really easy for them to instantly understand who you are, what you're about, who you help, and how you can get in contact with them. You want to make it easy for others. If they have to search, or I like to say this, if you confuse them, you will lose them, right? No one's going to spend the time to dig deeper to figure out who you are or who you serve. I'm sorry, nobody will. Nobody's got the time. Everybody has other stuff going on. So if they get to your profile, make sure to make it count so then they can reach out to you and tell them. Do you want them to reach out on LinkedIn? Do you want them to email you? Do they want to connect? What do you want them to do? So have a call to action there so they know, oh, okay, if I want to learn more, I can go to this website, or I should reach out on LinkedIn, or I should email her or him or whatever. So make it easy for them.
Okay, so there's some great points in here. Okay, so number one, we talked about this idea of a hook, right? One of the things that I would love to do with you is, if you're okay with this, I'd love to get right now on video an example of what we shouldn't do and how we shouldn't get into a topic, okay? And then the version on how you might suggest that we do. So could I put you on the spot? Could you give us 2 versions?
I can try. Okay. What's our topic?
You pick the topic.
Okay, so I will lead with my area of expertise rather than talk about something that I don't know. So about communicating and connecting better and everything that I've talked about. So the wrong way to go about that if this were a video, because you're seeing me now, it might be, I'm looking away, coming back and saying, yeah, so, I'm going for a walk with my dog right now, and it's a really beautiful day. And, what are you all doing? I hope you're having a great day too. And, oh gosh, what's that over there? Oh yeah. So, at this point, if you've spent all that time rambling on like that, don't do that. Don't know, because people have clicked away or clicked, if they've even clicked to begin with.
Yes.
So don't do that.
And what's so interesting is that when a person does that, because I used to do it and I know all about this, is that what I'm doing is I'm thinking. Because I was too lazy to actually go and write a little bit of an outline or my notes and what I want to talk about. So I just subject the viewer to that misery of watching me think, which is so selfish.
Well, it's fine if you do that, but just go back and edit that part out. Don't share that bit, because I have a lot of clients who are very verbally fluent and they do think as they speak. That's the way their brain works. And there's nothing wrong with that. But it's very rare. I mean, I know a few people who can do this. Very rare for someone to flip on their video, or their phone or whatever, and have like a 1 minute sort of to the point, get to it without any sort of forethought. It's got to be something that they have talked about a million times.
Yes.
And to call that message down. So it can't be, it's okay to do that. So don't feel like if that's how you process, that you can't. Just know that leading up to that point where you finally start with the point, know that that's the starting point to show to your viewer, for sure.
Amazing. Now give me the correct way to do it, and I'm gonna solo you here. Let's get this.
If you want to communicate and connect better with someone, don't do these things. So that's the example of a
perfect
to the point hook. Plus, people go, and it sort of piques their curiosity. Like, well, what shouldn't I do? There's I will say I tend to be a positive person, so I usually lead with what you can do, but just as effective. Occasionally throwing in the don't do this. Here's what you should not do. Avoid these 7 things. And people be like, oh, because they do love lists. People, again, not to belabor this point, but make it easy for others, right?
Yes.
You want to make it easy for them to read, to stop, to view, whatever it is. Yeah, be a scroll stopper. Exactly. And it's just get to the point right away. Like, what's the big idea? And it's like, and then under that, you can give them some ways that support that to help that. And then it's always nice at the end of a post to have some sort of call to action again, whether it's trying to get them to engage. So share with me your best ways, or what do you think, or what would you add to this, or who's somebody who does this great, or, one of these things because again, you put something out there, it's great. It's there for anyone who views it, but how do you know how people feel about it unless they comment? They can click like or one of the other emojis, but it's great to have a conversation starter. You pose something out there. You can pose a question. You can ask for advice, and there are polls. Now, there are all sorts of things you can do, but the idea is you want to draw others in. And the best way to do that is to give them something that they can comment on other than just a great post. Maybe there's something that you share that triggers an experience they had, or, they feel very strongly about something, good, bad, or otherwise, but they feel compelled to share it with you. And then you start that dialogue. And I know folks too, that, that's part of their strategy is commenting on other people's content to begin that conversation and draw them and showcase their thought leadership. So there are many ways to do this. But yeah, I think the idea of getting right into it, giving somebody something that, meaty that they can kind of glom onto in the beginning that will keep them watching or keep them reading is really the best strategy.
Love that. Okay. One of the other things that you mentioned was this idea of having your bio be your story. So I am personally guilty of previously having a very outdated bio. I copied and pasted something that was written in third party. There was no cred in it. There was no life story, no vulnerability. And I went through the process of actually writing a little bit of a story. Not saying it's perfect, but it's definitely an update or iteration of it. What are some suggestions that you might give when we do write that about section, that bio on LinkedIn, or for that matter, any social platform?
Sure. I would say this, make sure it's in first person, because that, writing in third person is fine for a bio. That is the traditional way a bio is written. However, remember on LinkedIn, you not only have that about section, you have an experience section. That is essentially the experience section to me is your online resume, right? That's where you have a chronological listing of every role that you've had. And then you have an opportunity to have descriptive copy to talk about what you've done, what you've accomplished in those roles. The summary section is just that. It's really more that highlight. It's the about, and most of them can be really boring, unfortunately. So this is your opportunity. You control that narrative. Find a way to weave together, even if you've had a very nonlinear career path, there's something that's always going to connect the dots on that and make it easy for someone to see that. Again, you control it. I haven't always been a writer by trade. I have lots of different things I've done. But when you find something that it's like, oh, that's what you connect the dots for the reader and they get it. And then, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. You want it to make sense. But it's an opportunity. Remember, it's not just a rehash of, I was a VP of marketing, or I was, it's not that. That's already there. So use that as an opportunity to weave together personal and professional stuff to really highlight what matters most to you. And kind of, if people are familiar with Simon Sinek and Find Your Why, it's like, what is, driving you? What's the root of what you're doing? Who are you helping? Again, it's an opportunity to say this, to let people know up front, I work with leaders, or I do this and I help them do this. It's always a good idea to talk about who you are and what matters most to you, but also how you can help others and who are the people specifically that you help. So common thread, first person, you have a lot of real estate. I think it's like 2,600 characters now. Have a call to action, right? And make it not just one block of text, because that's hard for anyone to read, and I'm not suggesting that every line has a space between it, but certainly when you look at it, make sure that there's some breathing room for your eyes, so to speak. So it's easy to kind of find those things. Don't be afraid to call out some specialties and format it a little differently, so it's more visually pleasing to the eye too, because that matters. People think it doesn't matter, but if you're someone who's going to somebody's profile and they have the same information, but one is presented in such a way that it makes it difficult to read, and it's like all just run on one big block of text. No one's going to want to read that. Again, it's about making it easier, a pleasant experience, because remember, that about section comes back to your personal brand, right? It's about how you're making others feel in your presence, and even though you aren't physically there, your brand, the way you present yourself in writing, visual, whatever you do, that's part of that in your LinkedIn profile.
Really good. I think all of us should just take a minute to go and make sure that our bios are updated. We've got 2,600 characters, add our calls to action, add blocks, make it readable, share our story, connect with people. So important, so valuable. You also mentioned, this idea of repetition, and I think a lot of people suffer from this problem of, I don't want to repeat myself because then people are going to get irritated because I'm just saying the same thing over again. And how do we find our balance with that?
Well, I mean, as you know, there are multiple ways to say the same thing, and you should be so lucky that somebody actually comments back to you, I keep hearing the same things from you. Well, that means they're paying attention and that it's working, right? Yeah. That they'll say, oh, well, okay, well, because Amy's talking about communication, connection, or thought, okay, that's what matters most to her.
It's not you disgust me. It's you disgust me.
Yes, that's right. So I wouldn't worry so much about that. We are far closer to our content than anybody else. So I think repeating themes, right? Concepts, areas of expertise are okay. The way that you illustrate those things can and should differ. So mix it up with your stories, but have it come back to central concepts and things and themes that you want others to associate with you, that are aligned with what matters most to you.
Unbelievably valuable. Amy, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast here. Where can folks learn more about you, social channels, website?
My website is my name, amyblaschka.com. So you'll find everything you need to know about me there. I'm also very active on LinkedIn. Obviously, I post there every day. So you can find and follow me there. I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Amy Blaschka. So repetition, you'll find me there as well. And though I'm on TikTok, I'm not on TikTok. I'm there, but I haven't posted anything yet. So I'm still experimenting.
Okay, very, very cool. Amy, well, thank you so much. Your contact info will be in the show notes here. Stick around for a couple of minutes. I'm going to end this now, and we'll share some notes. Thanks again.
Thanks, Ruben.